this bed's been shortened by somebody else other than us, and they shortened it too much, so it doesn't fit. Hey guys, we're back at it on Edmund's truck this week. In the last video, you saw us locate the engine and transmission in its final resting place. This is something we've kind of been through before with these larger valve covers, knowing that we needed to clearance the firewall and that our headers may get close to the toe boards when we set the engine back as far as we want. So a lot of that last video was getting the engine and transmission in place and cutting out any sheet metal that was going to interfere with that location. So in the meantime, over the past month, Dylan has knocked out all the firewall sheet metal. He fixed the toe boards, made room there, and did any kind of rust repair. There's also some components that got mounted on the inside of the firewall. But today what we want to do is finally put that cab back on the frame, make sure that it is in its correct location. There's plenty of room for the header and the valve covers to be able to be removed and all that stuff. And then finally, the big thing that you guys have asked for time and time again is how do you raise a bed floor? So we're gonna show you that. We're gonna walk through how we're gonna do it on this truck, and then also explain how we've done it on previous trucks in the past. And there's also a way to do this to save some time and money. So I'll give those hints and tricks along the way. So let's go ahead and get right to it. So while they're moving that cab over, I'll show you guys some of the things that I've got wrapped up over the last month. So in the video again, the last video, we locked down the engine placement. So now that we know it's gonna live there forever, I can go ahead and start doing the starting charging cables, power steering pressure hose. I can do the fuel lines, transmission cooler plumbing is all done. So you can see some of that stuff that we're kind of proud of. On this one, we did all really nice charging cables. I put a heat shrink thermal coating over the cables, and they're all 2-gauge welding cables, so real high strand count, lots of conductivity with those cables. So all 2-gauge stuff, all that's done, and all the starting charging cables route to one of our power bulkheads that we put on the bottom of the frame. I'm sure you've seen me talk about these before, but I really like how we do that. It just allows me to be able to more cleanly route the power and ground cable to the engine from the battery. And then in the case that we need to take the engine out, we just simply unbolt those cables. So all that stuff's done. Fuel hoses are installed. And then we did a bunch of the sensor mounting too for the engine. And I don't think I talked about any of this in the last video, but fuel pressure transducer and engine oil pressure transducers are mounted. And I do these remote like this to take some vibration out of the sensor. They'll kind of read cleaner. And then this is our dual lambda, so O2 sensors to CAN. So that little module's mounted. And then the transmission cooler plumbing is pretty cool in that on these transmissions, they're really susceptible to having the heat or the temperature of the fluid just right. So we've been using these inline thermostats. So I think that's a 160-degree thermostat. So it'll allow the fluid to get up to temperature before it routes it or allows it to go through the cooler to then to be force cooled. So All the plumbing is pretty much wrapped up on this chassis. And then the biggest thing was the new wheels and tires. So we've got the Forge line. These are 19 by 12s all the way around. And I think these are called the AL309s, which is a newer design from Forge line. And these are beautiful, man. I don't typically do the brushed outer barrels. I like, personally, the polished barrels, but these I think are gonna look really cool, especially with the patina builds. I don't know, I think it's gonna look cool, so happy to see these on here. 325 wide tire all the way around, and then the barrels on the outside of the rear wheels are a little bit wider because the independent rear suspension has a little narrower wheel mount surface to wheel mount surface width, so they do look like they've got a staggered fitment, but it's essentially the same width, same tire all the way around, so pretty cool. Yeah, so a lot of that little stuff is tidied up and ready to go. All the exhaust hangers are mounted. I've done some little bit of wiring to components that are mounted on the frame, so just trying to make best use of the time while Dylan was working on that cab. So pretty pumped to see how everything fits underneath the cab today. It's the problem with really wide front tires. Before we put this cab down on the frame, I want to make sure that I give Dylan plenty of attention for all the work that he did to this. So I don't want to undersell how good this looks or what it took to do this. So you guys can remember the factory firewall essentially comes to here and then it steps over. So he had cut out all that stuff. We pretty much cut like on a flat right here. And then same thing, cut the factory firewall like in here and shoved it all back. And then all this got cut out. So all this stuff has been shaped with a hammer and a sandbag, English wheel, planishing hammer, TIG welded, metal finished.
Yep.
So this is all new piece. This is an all new piece. And then there's like smaller shaped pieces in here that finish all that out. And then this is moved up in there because we had that engine set so far back. But really, really killer work. I don't want to talk about it all. Dylan's the man. He did all this stuff.
I don't know what to say.
Good job, Dylan.
So before we put the cab back onto the chassis, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the firewall work that got done. So you've seen in the last video that we kind of just rough cut this stuff so that we could get the right clearance around the valve covers. So now all of this is filled in. So pretty much this whole section here and along here on both sides got remade, smooth, metal finished. And I pretty much just did this with a sandbag, a teardrop mallet, and a $50 planishing hammer from Amazon. So any of you guys out there that don't think you can tackle this stuff because the equipment's too expensive or anything like that, there's plenty of videos on YouTube that you can find, and you can buy pretty inexpensive tools and still get quality work done. So we seen in the last video too that the header was hitting here. So I raised the floor here. We smoothed all this out. There's reinforcements behind here for the throttle pedal, reinforcements behind here for the booster and the steering column and everything. So now we're gonna test fit this cab. Again, put it on there. It's gonna be perfect. I'm pretty confident about it, so I'm ready to rock and roll.
Rear end's got to go that way.
Yeah, we're pretty close there. I wish we were building. You okay?
Yeah, I am right now. Right here.
Okay.
I'm just removing this Adele clamp for the fuel hoses. This is just one of the things that you just Just try to make the best educated guess you can of that it'll clear. The hoses will clear the way that I've got it clamped will not. Let me pop that back.
Yeah, pop it back up. Back quite a bit on this side. I'm trying to watch this valve cover.
I'm about to go up with the cap.
Yeah.
Got to shift it around just a little bit to get the bolts to line up, but so far pretty happy. Like a lot of times when mounting some of this stuff by the trans or way that you wrap these hoses, you make an educated guess. And I made an educated guess to the best that I could, and I think we're going to be really good. Everything's tight, but totally serviceable, and yeah, no fitment issues at all really, so pretty happy. Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty darn close.
Pretty dang close.
I'm
Am I
still
looking good?
Yeah, I'm still good.
That's pretty level.
Huh?
That seems pretty level.
I'm gonna grab a tape measure. I said these fuel hoses are gonna be totally fine. As long as they lie side by side and not on top of each other, there's plenty of room. I tell you what, we may want to notch this support back here.
Which support?
Back here,
Oh yeah.
just to make it a little safer. Sharpening over some rust and dirt.
So I'm measuring off the frame to the edge of the cab so that we make sure that we get the cab nice and centered on here. That way, while we're checking for clearances and everything, we get a good, accurate position of everything and what actually needs to be clearanced.
I'm making sure that the cab's level front to back. So all I really do is I can take measurements off a couple spots of the rockers to make sure that the cab doesn't need to come up in the back or up in the front. If anything, the front needs to come down, or excuse me, up like a thin washer.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, we're good right where it's at.
Nice.
Real nice. So this worked out great. I mean, I've got a full hand clearance between the valve cover and the firewall. Tons of room for wiring and plumbing back there. Yeah, Dylan, this worked out perfect. Yeah, same. Equal amount of room on this side. Tons of room for those pressure transducers. Plenty of room for the header now. I love it. I think it seems perfect.
Yeah, looks sick.
Yeah, look from up here. It's great.
Yeah, it looks like it's actually centered in there.
No, the bed needs to come back.
Okay, okay. Well, that's what I've seen up here. All right, guys, so we just test fit this onto the chassis. We have to notch out this rear brace. And the reason for that is that we wanted to get the biggest fuel tank that we could possibly in there. So we tried to use all the space that was accessible to us. So now the fuel lines are contacting this whenever it's sitting on there. So we're gonna go ahead and notch it out so that those have good clearance.
There you go, forward and then your way. Good.
There we go. Wow.
Perfect. Six.
The Dorothy Mantooth is a saint. Sorry.
We're trying to be professional here, Dylan. We do need to pull this, weld that, and then we'll take our 6 inches out of this, you know, from here up to wherever. And then the only unknown, because we've never done it this way before, is this piece here.
Yeah.
I think we should just pull it and remake.
Like a fill-in. That's probably the easiest.
Well, because I think this will be kind of interfering. You know, I mean, it leans in too much.
Yeah.
Like what I want ours to do is step more
way up.
vertical.
Yeah.
And come out. Okay, guys, so like I said earlier, there are quite a few different ways to raise a bed floor. And the way that we've done it a lot in the past is the cheapest and fastest way, which would be to recreate this flange that mounts the bedside on top of the bed floor up however many inches you need it to go. So if we were typically doing like a 4-inch raised bed floor, you could make a new bracket, just broke out of 14 gauge, and you could weld it in here 4 inches up or however high you're gonna raise the bed floor. But in this case, what we wanna do is we wanted to do a little bit nicer, take it a step further. So this is gonna involve more labor than doing it that other way. But what it'll do is we will end up with a finished product where these panels that are stamped in the inner bed side will just be smaller. So we won't be covering up the stamping, we'll actually be shrinking the size of the stamping. And then we'll be moving up the factory flange those 6 inches that we're gonna raise this bed floor. So before we get into that, what we wanna do is we're gonna take out the third stake pocket. So all long bed 67 to 72 trucks had a middle stake pocket. And some people like to see that just to show that it was a long bed. I don't wanna see it. I don't want anybody to think that it was a long bed. So we're gonna pull this out and then we're gonna smooth this center stake pocket hole. And then there's a filler piece that's in here, or if you wanna call it like an inner fender for the bedside, we're gonna cut this out. So there's just MIG welds that spotted in here, and then we're just gonna cut along the bottom of this, and we're gonna remake this completely. You could just cut here and move the bed floor up and then make a fill-in panel, but we wanted to run our wheels offset as tight as possible to the bed. It's the most attractive way that we like to fit the wheel. So we're gonna redo this, and when we redo this, we're gonna roll the bedside a little bit more vertical so that that return goes more vertical instead of leaning in however many degrees this is. So that's how we're gonna do this one, and we're gonna get right after it. This is pretty labor intensive. So what we're gonna do just for time savings is we're not gonna completely finish weld and metal finish this. We're just gonna TIG tack everything back together and get the bed together just to kind of show you guys the process more than the finished product. So Dylan's gonna start hammering this out. I'm gonna do this exact same process to the headboard. So instead of just shortening the headboard, you know, off the bottom and moving the flange up, we're gonna take those 6 inches out of the bead rolled section or the stamped section of the headboard. So that's how we're gonna do the inner bed sides and the headboard. The rear of the bed is a lot easier. All that we really need to do is break a new piece of sheet metal and extend the bottom of this 6 inches. So the bed is obviously 6 inches higher than what it would have been from the factory. So we're gonna extend this. And then this is where the factory bed sides bolted to. So we'll have to make sure that this is 6 inches lower on our inner bed side too, so that we can secure this. And then all of the 67 to 72 trucks, when they put the beds all together and they got everything snugged, they would MIG weld a stitch on the inside here. So we'll get everything final squared and everything once we get the bed sides done later on down the road, and then we'll finally MIG weld them. So anyways, that's the plan. Now we gotta do is do it. So you guys saw me lay these out, and we're raising this bed floor 6 inches. So I'm gonna cut down here, and I wanna do all my welding down here in a stronger part of the panel. So some place that I can also still metal finish and hammer and dolly. So I kinda got just in the flat part below or above this radius. So when I laid out my Sharpie lines, I used a really fine tip Sharpie so that I can make sure that I mark exactly inside of my 6 inches. So you can see where I'm cutting the line off. So 6 inches would have been from the outside of that mark to the outside of that one. So I'm just making sure my cut wheel stays on the inside of those marks. And then I've made my other mark down here in this radius so that this is a stronger part of the panel. So when I go introducing heat into this area, it's not gonna be as prone to warping as if I did it up in the middle of the panel. So that's why I've got it down here. And I can still use my finger sander and metal finish all that weld right there. So, and then this corner piece, I'll lay this panel up over here and transfer that mark whenever I get this all cut off. But make sure you guys pay attention to your measurement. It's pretty critical. If you cut too much, the bed could be too low and you have to shim it up. If you don't cut it enough, then the bed floor is going to be too high and you'll have to redo it or cut your risers down. So anyways, that's how I laid this out.
Good now, are you?
Yeah. I would like to do this with one hand. There you go. Pretty good. It looks a little high, don't it?
A little bit.
That's okay. The cab is, there's no washers under the cab at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the header panel is all tacked together, and that went really, really good. So that tack welded together nice and straight. Doesn't seem to have any warp in it whatsoever, so I'm happy with that. Dylan's going ahead and he's already got this inner liner piece cut out. He's got the third stake pocket shaved, and then now he's laying out his 6-inch mark in the middle of this bedside. This is a lot more intricate because there's a factory little reinforcement bracket that's in here that we had to remove, and then we'll we've drilled out all these plug welds so that we can actually cut this piece, take it out, shorten it, and then re-plug weld it so it looks factory. So this is gonna take a little bit more time, but honestly, I think it'll be worth it. Compared to all the other ones that we've done that have just been, like you could see that we didn't raise that up. They all look fine, but if I were to look at it or anybody else like really look at it, you could tell that the bed floor had been raised up in it. Now this one's still gonna be kind of obvious because the bed floor is raised higher than some of the ones we've ever done before, but all the beading in the panels will look factory-ish, so I think it'll just be cosmetically better to look at. It's such an awesome truck. There's so much effort put into every area of this truck that there's no reason to not suction these bed sides and go the extra mile.
So I got the pieces that we cut out to move it up so that we kept this bead rolled area. So now that I got those tacked in place, I wanted to make sure that my wheel tub still lined up with the factory holes that are in this and was still in line with the center of the wheel arch. That way it wasn't off to one side or not. So now that I know that that is good, I'm marking the inside of this here so I can take some of this material out so it doesn't look like I just hacked it off. We're going to try to make this look like it was like this from the factory.
This bed's been shortened by somebody else other than us, and they shortened it too much. So it doesn't fit. Nice. You have to take material off the entire front of the bed floor.
Yeah.
And we need to measure the other side and make sure it's not
This is different.
Yeah, make sure it's the same.
Old Yeller was like that, remember?
One was different than the other.
Yeah.
Shoot down.
78 and 5/16. So it's 3/16 different.
It's 3/16 different?
Yeah.
Great job, whoever did this. Jesus. All right, so it's the next day. Yesterday we had a really good day. We got the bed floor on Emmons' truck, and I got the headboard sectioned and installed. All that stuff looked good. Dylan spent a little bit of time yesterday. As you saw, he smoothed that stake pocket where the third stake pocket was still present in the middle of this bed. And then he went ahead and started raising up the inner bed sides, the 6 inches. And then what we always do is we quickly mock up the bedside, before we burn everything in and before everything's done. And the reason for that is to make sure that we didn't make a dumb mistake or there wasn't some like bed mount or something that wasn't the right height. So we always try to just validate that stuff before we put all the work into this. So today, when we went to mock that bedside up, we found that when someone shortened this from long bed to short bed, they essentially shortened one of these bed sides 3/16 of an inch too short. So the only way to really make this thing fit would be to either cut it all apart and redo it, modify the bed floor and cut some off the front of the bed floor, which I don't like the idea of that either since it's a brand new AMD bed floor. And then we would be left with this bedside, which is longer by 3/16 and would technically fit okay. But if you start looking into this bedside, it's got a whole bunch of holes drilled in it, a bunch of Bondo on the outside of the bed, Bondo hanging out on the inside. Where they did all the welds, none of that stuff was treated, so all the welds from the cuts have been rusting. The cuts on the inside are not dressed very well, so we would have to body work those. And then still invest the amount of labor it would take to get rid of that stake pocket and start raising this bedside, which is honestly not the best bedside. So in car building, it's nothing but problem solving. So what I'm gonna do is talk to the owner about just replacing these with a brand new set of AMD bedsides. Then all we have to do is simply raise the inner portion of the bedside on a new set of bedsides. Then we end up with bedsides that are for a short bed, don't have the stake pocket, are the correct length, and will inherently just bolt right to that bed floor. So that's the move. So today I'm gonna pivot and we're gonna go ahead and mock up the front fenders and the core support, which does take a little bit of work because we're doing a fiber forged carbon fiber core support. So we'll do all the necessary drilling of holes and stuff and mount the core support and the front fenders. So then the front half of the body is done and we know everything's good, gapped, and ready for the bedside work. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna work on that. If we have more time left in the day, I can always work on plumbing the brake master cylinder, which I'll show you guys here shortly. But yeah, so that's how it goes, and we're gonna make the best of it. While Dylan's grabbing the core support mounts and the core support hardware, I thought it'd be a cool opportunity to show you guys the brake booster and master cylinder that we're using on this truck. So if you guys are familiar, if you've looked around on the internet at all, this is what's called an iBooster. These are an electric power brake booster. This one's off like a 2020 Honda Accord turbo car, and that's what a lot of guys buy these for. I believe these are also a booster that would be available on any other kind of hybrid or full electric EV vehicle. So the Mach-E's and Teslas and a lot of those cars would have had a brake booster like this. And the reason why I'm gonna try one out is that this truck, we want power brakes because he's gonna drive it on the street a lot. He will race it from time to time. So that then leads me to narrowing my selection of power brakes down. There is Hydro Boost that's available, and a lot of guys do like Hydro Boost. Hydro Boost works good, and it assists the brakes terrifically. The issue that I have with it is if anybody's gonna get into any kind of really heavy hard driving or road racing or anything like that, there's a lot of underhood temperature and there's a lot of heat on the exhaust manifold or the header, and you're powering that booster with hydraulic fluid that's coming out of the power steering pump. And power steering fluid is extremely flammable. So if you ever had a high pressure hose failure on a Hydro Boost unit, the truck's gonna burn. Like that fluid is gonna light off on the header and it's gonna burn. So that's the reason why I don't necessarily like using Hydro Boost units on vehicles where I drive them really hard. Then there's a lot of other like vacuum boosters that we could use. This one's got a pretty big camshaft, so there's gonna be a lot of overlap and potentially not a lot of vacuum created by this engine. So we could use a vacuum pump to create vacuum, but the logical solution for me was to try out one of the new iBooster units. And so there are companies out there nowadays that make billet adapters, and we're gonna start listing these on our website after I thoroughly test to make sure that these are a great product. But this allows you to bolt an aftermarket master cylinder like a Willwood master cylinder directly to the iBooster units. And then anytime you do one of these like more heavily assisted boosters like an iBooster or Hydro Boost or anything like that, you'll want to kind of go up to like an 1.1/8" bore master cylinder. So that's what we're doing here, 1.1/8" bore iBooster, and then this one will have to be powered and wired. But the other thing that we did is that we wanted a really nice direct straight connection to our power brake pedal ratio hole on the brake pedal lever itself. So all 67 to 72 trucks had one hole drilled on the brake lever, and it was at the 6.3:1 ratio, which is higher than where I'm gonna mount it. I'm gonna mount at 4.5:1 ratio. So the way that 67 to 72 trucks change the ratio between manual brake and power brake is they had that little mechanism on the outside of the firewall behind the brake booster. So that being eliminated in this case, we're gonna hook the iBooster's lever directly to the pedal. So to aim that lever down at the 4.5:1 ratio, I've designed a 6-degree angled spacer that we're gonna mount behind this iBooster. And this one we've just 3D printed, so we'll end up having one machined out of aluminum. But I just wanted to quickly touch base on this. It's something that people are kind of dipping their toes into nowadays and trying out. And I have driven vehicles with iBoosters on them before and they felt incredible. So I thought it was just due time for Level 7 to try to implement one on their builds too. So anyways, it's a cool thing to talk about. Just wanted to show you that before we dive into fenders and core support. It's probably the lightest core support you could ever have. I think these are 4 pounds. Yeah, 4-pound carbon fiber core support.
So I put this on a little bit prematurely, just trying to align the core support. I made sure I put it on here and clamped it to the frame, didn't put any holes in it yet, so I can measure off the frame to the edges to make sure that it's centered left to right. But the measurement that I can't figure out without putting the fender on is forward to back. So I was doing that now, was putting this on here and realizing that it wasn't going back all the way. And I forgot that we had made this pocket for the HVAC hoses to come through. And whenever you do that, the heads of the bolts contact the fender. So you have to trim out some of the inside of the fender. So I'm gonna pull this back off and get that done. That way we can put this back on here and get our front to back measurement.
So I'm just quickly making a set of like mocked up core support bushings. So I'm just turning these at 70 thousandths thick. And that's what we've historically seen on like all our other trucks. So I'm just, instead of going out and purchasing a set, I'll just make these real quick and get the whole front end mocked up today. That way we make sure everything's right where it needs to be. So yeah, just grab some Delrin stock.
Oh yeah.
Does it fit this time?
It does this time, yes. That's kind of a problem that is expected whenever you replace buy a lot of aftermarket parts. Not that these weren't good, but they're not always exactly dead on to what the factory had. So I had to replace this lower mounting location for the fender here on both sides. And it has like a little pocket. The edges were just kind of flared out on it a little bit, so I just took a dolly, hammered it back up where it should be, and now it seems like we're going all the way back and fitting pretty good.
We really should develop a template for where to drill the holes on this. Yeah. So we don't have to always put the grill back in. Yeah. So when we do these carbon fiber core supports, these things are right out of the mold. So they're not cleared, they're not drilled, they're nothing. So fitment is kind of up to the end user. So what we have to do to make sure that we get the fenders mounted, because in and out is pretty vital on these trucks. So what we do is we'll get the height all set in the back of the fenders, we'll mount the core support, and then we have to put the grill in. So we'll mount the whole grill shell in, so that sets the width, and then we'll go ahead and reach through here and Sharpie mark all the holes and pull everything back apart and drill all these holes. And then we'll slot the holes a little bit so we got movement in the fender, so we can always shim the fender away from the grill if we need to. But yeah, so it's a little bit of a job.
Have to oval this hole.
Yeah, it's not up and well, is our door too high? No, it's not, is it? The fender was up here. Yeah.
Yeah, I just gotta move this hole like right at the edge.
Okay.
pulled it down a lot when you tightened into it, like it's pulling it back down. So since we've pivoted in what we're doing, we're gonna knock out a bunch of odds and ends just to keep moving forward. Dylan has been fitting up the fenders and the core support and all that, and it led me to like dialing in the door panel or the door gaps. So Dylan and I are working on that right now. So when we switch to these billet door hinges, I just need to be able to adjust everything and get it all dialed in. You can't really tell the in and out unless the fender's on. So now that we've had the fender on, we adjusted the in and out. Now I'm gonna actually raise the back of the door just a hair. So these are the fiber forged billet door hinges. And these things are awesome because they have a design in which there's like gonna be essentially no pin wear. And they've got like an impregnated bronze bushing in there that they pivot on. And then what's really neat too is, you guys can't see it from there, but there's dual indent springs. So there's like the check strap has like a groove machined in it. And then it's got like a spot at the end of its travel that like a little ball bearing can like fall into to like hold it open. And they've got a spring on the back side of each ball bearing. And then there's a little Allen, so you can set how tight you want the spring for the ball bearing. And then you run another little Allen in and jam it. So like if you have a carbon fiber door, you could set those kind of light. Or if you have like a full steel door, they're in here, you can't really see them, but you can tighten them a little bit tighter so that it holds a steel door open. Real nice. The gap all along the top and around the back is like perfectly parallel the whole way. Mm-hmm. And then like the A-pillar gap is not. You know what I mean? Like it's got heavy eighth, a little under 3/16 to nothing. One hair in here, yeah. Wow. And you can see like that rust right there has been because this door's been touching there forever.
Yeah.
I feel good about the way it's on right now.
Yeah.
That's great.
Is that check strap holding?
right, guys, I want to say thank you for watching another episode of Emon's Truck Build. This episode went a little different, but you know what? That's how truck building or any kind of car building goes. So if you guys are in your garage and you're building a vehicle and you run into something that doesn't quite fit right or some just mystery issue, you just got to kind of deal with it. You got to figure out what you want to do, and if you can't figure out what you want to do, forget about it for a while, move on to something else, and then come back to it. Once you sleep on it, you may think of a way to resolve the issue. And what we ran into on this one was we just found some bed sides that had been hacked up and just cut down in a way that I didn't want to use them anymore. So I ordered 2 new bed sides from AMD to complement the AMD bed floor and tubs that we already have. So honestly, it's going to end up as a better product, and the bed's going to be nicer than what it would have been with those cut down bed sides. So moving on from that, we pivoted and we got the carbon fiber core support, and we have the fenders mounted, the grills in, and we just learned more stuff. You know, like we needed to cut some brackets and trim some stuff to get the grill to fit like we want. But now we can just keep progressing forward. We can do the radiator now, radiator hoses, air intake, mount all kinds of other components that we need to. So in the meantime, we're probably going to work on that, and then when the bed sides come in, we're going to hop right back into showing you guys how to raise the bed floor in your truck. So thank you so much again for following along in this series. I hope you're enjoying it. We're having a blast. Cheers, y'all.